this knowledge in our heads. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Sarah and Elena.
Elena, you want me to go ahead and share my screen? Or
let me just kind of introduce myself and the research analysis that we've been doing, and then we can share screen and show the document if that works. So hi everybody, my name is Elena Schmidt. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the analyst in the Equity and Inclusion Department at the city. So I head up the Policy Equity Analysis Team, which is an interdepartmental team of city staff who have agreed to give some of their time to doing research and analysis related to equity in some city policies. So one of the policies that we have been requested to do some research on was related to boards and commissions, accommodation, and compensation. There's currently minimal, if any, policies related to that in the city right now. And so this was kind of meant to be a landscape analysis, very exploratory. What are other cities offering regarding boards and commissions, accommodations, and compensation? And then what does the city of Asheville currently offer? Kind of how are we aligning with what other cities are doing? What might we be able to do in the future? That sort of thing. So the Policy Equity Analysis Team has been spending a little while, I think a couple months, looking into what other jurisdictions are doing, starting in North Carolina, but then expanding across the country. Are you all able to hear me okay? Okay, great, thank you.
You're a little bit muffled, to be honest, kind of muffled and echoey.
My microphone.
does this sound a little better?
Oh, so much more.
Cool. Do I need to repeat anything? All right, cool. I'll go from there. So the Policy Equity Analysis Team has just been working on doing this landscape analysis for a couple of months, and now we're working on synthesizing all of the information that we've gathered from our research into what other jurisdictions are doing and what might be possible in Asheville. So we have put this summary report together. It's in the very early stages of drafting. So when you get in there, if it looks a little messy, it's because we're still putting it together. And that's why we're hoping to ask y'all to take a look at it at these early stages and kind of help us synthesize some of the information that we've found as well, and give us some feedback on how it reads. Does it make sense? If possible, is there anywhere we could elaborate a little more? We may or may not be able to elaborate a little more, just depending on what we found. But we can certainly take a look at anything that you flag as important to take another look at. Do y'all have any questions about that before Sarah pulls up the document? All right, Sarah, if you're ready. So this is the draft summary report. These are contacts that folks can reach out to for questions. I should note that the request came at the interest of some city council members who wanted to learn a little more about what other cities were doing. And so that's kind of how this project got started. The city manager's office asked the Policy Equity Analysis Team to put this research together. And now we're at the point of synthesizing and summarizing what we found. This first section just shows like the research questions essentially that we were tasked with looking up. The first one, it's a lot of words, but it boils down to what are other cities doing? And then the second bullet point is what is the city of Asheville currently doing? And then the third bullet point is, can we draft any recommendations or possible options for the city based on what we found? So that's the purpose of this research. If you'll scroll down a little more, Sarah. We talk a little about why the policy was selected. So why is it important to look at this? What was the purpose of this research and that sort of thing, and our understanding of the request. And if you'll go down a little more, Sarah, there are a few acronyms that pop up periodically throughout the report, so we have those summarized for quick reference. And then we also thought it was important to include context-wise the previous work related to equity and inclusion in city boards and commissions, with naming specifically the formerly proposed policy for realigning committees or boards and commissions with council committees. So there's a little context and history there that we thought was important to include for the city council members reviewing this summary report once we're done. So this section is about us hopefully working together now at this point. So we're just talking about what the realignment working group is, the work that y'all have been doing, and then the staff are seeking y'all's feedback on this early stage draft for this report. These are the actions taken for the analysis, the methods section, if you will. We have the policy equity analysis team used an equity toolkit, which is based very strongly on the Government Alliance for Race and Equity tool, to kind of think through what a boards and commissions compensation and accommodation policy or program might look like, might entail through an equity lens. And so you can see staff's thinking through there. We did some outreach, some general inquiries to other jurisdictions. That looked like anything from checking out their boards and commissions websites to actually giving a call to their clerk's offices or whatever offices or departments who manage their boards and commissions were. There's also a few non-government jurisdictions or non-government entities that we've included in this outreach, because we thought they were helpful resources. For example, there is a professor, a researcher at the University of Oregon or Washington, one of those Pacific Northwest states, who is doing research on equity and inclusion, specifically in advisory boards and public meetings. So there's like a thesis that one of his students has done on how to create more inclusive advisory boards. And so we've linked a copy of that into the outreach to jurisdictions document. If you're interested, you can find it there. We've done surveys to the North Carolina clerk listserv. So we just kind of sent a general survey out by email to see how other jurisdictions in North Carolina are doing related to accommodations or compensation. So you can see the responses there. We sent a survey out to city staff, so Asheville city staff, to see about staff perceptions for accommodations and compensation that might be needed based on their experience with their supporting their boards. And then the final piece that we've included as we've been going through this analysis is the responses from the survey you all did. We thought it was important to take a look at those responses and include them in our analysis of what accommodations and compensation could look like for boards and commissions. So I'll pause there and let's see if y'all have any questions or anything you need me to repeat. Go ahead, Alan. You're muted if you're speaking.
Two questions, actually. Closer to home, does a city or county, which really wasn't addressed, I don't think, in survey, are you aware of any board or commission in the city or county that's receiving any kind of compensation?
In our city and county, or in any city, county in North Carolina?
Our city and county, yeah.
In our city and county. So we do include that as one of our findings. The Reparations Commission does receive stipends, and those were initially coming out of not the general fund, but a different fund based on the sale of White Labs. Since then, that's shifted a little bit, and I don't know exactly the account that those are coming out of now. We have a note in here requesting Brenda to go in when she has a moment to add those details, but that's the only one.
Okay.
The others that do receive stipends don't come from city funds at all. So that's the ABC board and the MSD board, and those come from the entities that they serve, not from city.
Okay. My second question is that I read a lot about equity and inclusion, and it's used in a lot of different ways. Would it be helpful to perhaps give definitions of both equity and inclusion at the beginning of the report?
That's a great suggestion and a great question. Sarah, do you mind scrolling up to the why was this policy selected? So our guidance for this research that we did was, again, at the interest of some city council members, and actually scroll up a little more, Sarah, to the research questions, I'm sorry. And this is the prompt that we were given, the bullet points here. This is the prompt that we were given to begin doing this analysis. So our understanding of this prompt was that there was an interest in seeing if there were any policies or programs that either other jurisdictions were doing or that might be possible here in Asheville in order to increase the diversity of boards and commissions in Asheville and make it easier to participate, or by making it easier to participate. And scroll down a little bit, Sarah, to back to the why. And so this is basically our summary of our understanding of the purpose of that research. So it's not as clear cut as like, here's a definition of equity that we're using, but it does kind of give context for how we're thinking about equity and inclusion specific to this project.
I only raised that. Oh, I was going to say I only raised that issue because of the most recent Supreme Court decision of Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill. And we just need to be careful of how we use that and how we apply it.
Yes, yes, thank you.
When it comes to equity and inclusion. So, if we define it carefully and we're sure that it's within the limits of, or how the courts are defining it too, then I think, we're doing the appropriate thing. But I think that should be up towards the front of the report. That's all.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. And then Theodore.
Ted had a question. You're all set.
Yes. First, I want to compliment staff. I think this is a really good research effort, and you're to be congratulated on that. I was reading though the paragraph or a couple of paragraphs, the previous research. And if I'm reading that right, it seems to me that either this is something that's brand new to the awareness of certainly myself, or maybe most of the people on this in this working group, or it's a bit of revisionist history. I don't recall at all the original purpose of the proposal to collapse the boards and commissions into four as really having anything to do with seeking more inclusion and equity. I think if that may have been part of the thinking, maybe it was a part of the thinking, but it was never presented to us or to anybody, as far as I know, that was a major factor.
Correct. It was never part of those 3 meetings we had at the very beginning. That was never, we had never even got close to that discussion.
Thank you for that note. That may have been the way I was understanding it and not reflective of the purpose of that proposal initially. So I appreciate y'all's memory and bringing that to the forefront. So we can make a note there to just go back and maybe adjust how we're framing that history.
Yeah, maybe a way to reframe it would be that this process that was initiated presents an opportunity for taking a look at inclusion and equity. But, I think it's a little misleading to present it as the purpose of that initiative. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I see a note in the chat from, I see a couple, hang on. Yes, from Jay. So that Jay says that was part of the messaging from the city. Public did not agree, and that was part of the reason that this group formed. Jay, are you saying that equity was part of the messaging from the city for the original proposal? Is that what that comment says?
That's my recollection, yes.
Okay.
That there were reasons given, and some of those reasons included that it would be more equitable. It wasn't clear how. But I remember that being part of the reasons that were given.
And I think that's where some of our questions derive from about, are you able to get to the meetings that the time, when they're scheduled? So many of them are scheduled during the workday. So many people who work full time can't take time off from work. We have, and that's an equity issue. Transportation. I remember when I was on the public transportation board, we had a member who I had to take home after our meeting because the buses quit running at 6 and our meeting started at 5:30. Just stuff like that, which would prevent other people, little things like that can prevent them. Childcare, another big one. And $14 an hour isn't going to pay for childcare. Just, saying, with one of these entities said that they paid a living wage for the $14 an hour for childcare. Y'all, any other questions?
I just have a few comments. I think the piece about equity that was in the original messaging was having to do with like the more flexible working groups and the fact that people could participate at their own will and didn't need to be appointed to a board. I think that's where the like opportunity for more participation is coming from. But in terms of like the actual boards, not the working groups, but the boards, definitely the message was more about efficiency, as Nina was suggesting.
Consolidation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also think so, and the part that Ted's referring to is at the bottom of page 2 going into page 3. I'm pretty sure is what he was talking about. And then in the second paragraph of that section, it states that community feedback to the proposal was mixed. And I might argue that the public pushed back significantly towards the proposal. I wouldn't describe it as mixed.
I'm trying to think, who would we have said was in favor of that proposal? Did we see anyone in any of those meetings? Even the one that had 70 people in it at the first time, Sarah? I think maybe you and council members were in favor, but y'all don't count.
Well, I will say, yes, we remember those meetings, but in some initial outreach that was conducted via public input, we did hear some mix, but I would agree that there's significant pushback. But going back to previous comments, the idea and intent behind some of the original proposal was the accessibility piece and being more inclusive, some of what we've touched on here already. But so I'll note that, and I am also taking notes on this conversation, so we'll incorporate. But I will add, if there's major points that you want to have highlighted, if you could put them in the chat just to help us with our notes as well.
If I could add, Sarah, y'all have access as commenters on this document. So you can also highlight a section and then a little bubble will pop up that with, I think, a plus sign or a comment box. If you click on it, you can actually add a comment directly in the document. So following this call, if you have some time and you want to take a deeper look at this, you can go in and actually make comments directly in the document. If you don't know how to do that, or that's not the way you prefer, you can also send myself or Sarah an email and just let us know your thoughts that way as well.
You know, I do know that one entity, and that would be New York City, I think they compensate all their boards members. And
that's good to know.
That might be, not to say that their whole city structure is very, very different than ours. I mean, very different. But I do believe there is some kind of compensation. And going back to this, the efficacy of their participation, I would question. I would say with these folks that you're seeing here, right here today, you know, all the hours that they've put in for the glory is all they're getting is the glory, and it's a high level professional service that they have provided to the city. And to think what it might have cost, we've laughed about it, what it might have cost if we had had a consultant do this. And we think our product is better than some of what consultants have provided. But that's my thought there. I'll keep that. But you know, I do think that there's a payoff, or literally a payoff here on paid service. And I think some of us have talked about that too in the past in just general conversations. And also I think that we, one of the things that we've looked at in trying to get our own feedback is the delivery system. How are we marketing when we want volunteers? How are we marketing that? Who are we asking? What outlets are we going to? And that's where we need to rethink that. We're not going to the right markets to get the people that we want. You know, are you putting up a flyer at Hillside? Are you putting up a flyer at Spruce Hill, the apartments in Haw Creek? Is that where we're going? And I don't think we are. So if we're trying to get some differentials in and some diversity in, then we've got to be more diversified in our marketing.
Sarah, not to put you on the spot, but I feel like there was some flyers going out at some point, or maybe not. I remember like some discussion about following those focus groups from the initial proposal. There being discussion about where outreach could be done. Do you have any recollection, or like maybe you know offhand where outreaches goes when the clerk's office does outreach?
If we're talking about specific to advertising for vacancies on boards and commissions, definitely there's, I mean, our biggest tool that we use is the flyer and distributing that to multiple groups and tools that we have, including public input. Many of you may receive that from the clerk's office, boards at asheville.nc.gov. But we are, as part of, many of you are aware of, changing to a quarterly appointment process. And part of changing that process was to allow us in the clerk's office to develop a better marketing, as you say, program for outreach to get this in front of more boards and commissions. So you will be seeing a lot more updates on what we're trying to do. Absolutely welcome to more ideas. It's something we're working on. But that is something we're kind of launching this fiscal year. So hopefully more to come. Please send your ideas.
Thanks. So I see Ted and then Alan and then Nina. Go ahead, Ted.
Okay, yeah, so I gather that we are discussing the compensation that, and I'd just like to offer my opinion on that. I think that from the standpoint of, well, I think with regard to most board and commission members, but speaking for myself, the aspect of volunteerism, I think, is pretty strong. And I do think that the work of the boards and commissions does have real value. I think that the real way to reward that value is for the recommendations of the boards and commissions to be given, serious consideration by city council. I think where compensation might be warranted is if it could be an effective tool for bringing more diversity to boards and commissions membership. And I'm not sure that I'm not sure that it would work. It might. I'm not sure whether the level of compensation could really compensate someone of a moderate to lower income to devote that time and energy to a board and commission who was not otherwise inclined to do that. It might be worth an experiment, but I feel that if a compensation structure were initiated, it would be targeted on an income basis that those of us who those of us who don't really need $50 a meeting, I don't think we should be receiving it. I mean, speaking for myself. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ted. And Alan.
I don't have a final opinion on compensation. I think it's boards and commissions are primarily volunteer organizations, and it's a way of providing service back to the community. However, I do recall in fact, I saw it, I think earlier today, a comment from Kim Miller in the city of Asheville, and it was the John Boyle article about compensation from the boards and the reparations commission, and that's at $150 a month. And Kim Miller's response was that, well, basically, to paraphrase, they deserve it because of the amount of time that they are expending on that particular initiative. I know a lot of us spend time on beyond this board, on other boards that we serve. And so I think in terms of equity, I think we need to take a careful look at that also. As far as discussion about marketing open spaces on boards and commissions, I had in previous meetings talked about some ideas in terms of increasing equity and inclusion. And I think it should go well beyond just an advertisement on the city website of what openings are currently available each quarter. And in terms of resources, I would say, using the paper, the Urban News, the urban radio station, contacting churches in the community, African-American churches, for example, their boards and leadership. So I think there's quite a few ways of reaching out beyond just advertising. And I know you're looking at that now, but I just want to offer some of those other ideas too. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. And Nina.
So two different quick thoughts. The first is about outreach, and it seems to me that if we're going to have this quarterly process, I think it needs to come with something much more focused than just leaflets and ads. I would recommend that someone from staff arrange to be a participant at community neighborhood association meetings and talk this up, because the people who care the most are the ones who show up at those meetings. And they are already civic minded. They already care very much about the way the city responds to their needs. And that's fertile ground for recruitment. So send an ambassador, you know, maybe even get a current participant in the board that is looking to recruit and get them to go along as well so they can answer pertinent questions. But if you do this in person, you will get a much more robust response than from just throwing money at radio advertisements. I promise. Show up in person and you get a much better.
And I can say we are looking at various community meetings as well as neighborhood meetings and trying to get a spot on those agendas. So that you'll be seeing that over the next year or so. But yes, me or Jerry or someone from the clerk's office, but we're also teaming up with various projects that are already happening. You'll see more about the Go Bond. So we're going to be going with staff to various community meetings to also plug boards and commissions. So hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of us.
That's good to hear. And the second thing I wanted to talk about is this question of compensation. I feel pretty strongly about this. In reading through your draft, it's clear that it's not all that common, but in the places that it is being used, there's an opt-out thing so that folks who are comfortable financially or who don't have child care obligations and so forth can just say, you know what, I'm doing this because I can afford to do it. And I don't care about being compensated. That's awesome if that's the case for you. But there is an enormous swath of people who do not have that luxury and privilege. And arguably, many of those voices are the ones that we're just not hearing right now. And I think that anything we can do to lower the barriers to participation and also to express respect and value for people's time and energy is a good thing. And, you know, there is just an enormous amount of assumed privilege in saying, oh, you should just be honored to be able to give back to your community, to a bunch of people who are just like barely making it, but who still actually care and have something valuable to contribute. So I am all in favor of compensation. I say make it opt out. And let those people who can afford to do so and who are comfortable doing so opt out. Anything else, you end up with a kind of two-tier thing. Oh, you know, these are the people who are only doing it because they're paid to do it, you know, and it creates a division of voices that I think we need less of, not more of. So I feel quite strongly about this. And also, you can't know just by looking at someone what their financial situation is or what their household situation is. You know, people who look like they're doing okay and are managing may really actually need the assistance if they're going to be sacrificing their time. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then Elise?
Yeah, I definitely support what Nina was saying, you know, just to call back to the fact that of the people that did answer the demographic questions, now we have to remember that only about half of the respondents actually filled out that section. But of the people who did, 95% of them had at least a bachelor's degree and over half of them had a graduate degree. Not to say that higher education, you know, is for sure higher income, but there's a correlation. So definitely it seems like a universal compensation. I personally don't feel like that's necessary. And while we're talking a lot about the monetary compensation, there's also an opportunity for a lot more like in-kind compensation in the form of like parking passes. I noticed in the report that staff felt like, I think they got requests for parking passes, as well as most of them thought that that would be helpful. And between like that, meals and childcare, there's a lot of like in-kind options that I think would really help people.
Thanks, y'all. All right. So we were talking about okay, yeah. So here's here's how we formatted the summary, and that's where I'll start. So we're aligning different sections with the 3 research questions. One being, what are other jurisdictions doing? The second being, what is the city of Asheville doing right now? And the third being, what are some potential options that we can look further into? So this is the first section addressing that first question, what are other jurisdictions doing? And so what we've done is looking at all of that data that we've collected through our phone calls with other jurisdictions, looking at their websites, doing some reading of any available literature around boards and commissions, accommodations, and compensation. We've found like some general themes or some important things to highlight from those from that data, and we've put them here as findings. And so there's like a quick 1 sentence, this is the finding, and then a paragraph or 2 going into a little more detail and linking to any external sources or linking to or indicating which data we were looking at for this finding. So that's how these are formatted, and that might help you read through the structure of this without going into too much detail, because I'll let y'all like look more deeply at these outside of the meeting, so you have time to really get into it. Keep going down, Sarah.
Alana,
Mhm.
Alana, I'm sorry. Going back up to the making compensations for people with disabilities, not necessarily financial compensation. We had one member who was trying to participate who was constantly telling us that we were not accommodating her needs and never could really quite figure out what she wasn't getting. But what was interesting, when I called the School of Government, I couldn't find anybody at the School of Government that could give us any input on this either, which was astounding to me because that's my favorite place to go to all the time. So I do think that this is something that, what she wanted was for us to send out documents, mail her documents a week in advance or so she could have a chance to scan them or into a machine that would give her the audio. Some folks have, and some other meetings, I think about what we all had to do to gear up to do hybrid meetings, Zoom meetings, get a bigger computer screen, or things like that might be something that you may need to think about as far as what folks need. Doing a Zoom meeting on your phone is fine unless you've got documents that you're going to show. And most of these advisory board meetings are going to have documents up on the screen and and so helping folks with those things, making sure they do have internet service. We all seem to think that's so easy, but that's not necessarily the case. So some of those aspects too are barriers to participation, and interpretation of folks who don't, English is not their second language. Some of those kinds of things. I think that if we're really talking about, diversity, education, diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, the belonging part, we've got to make some more accommodations than what we're doing now. And belonging is what is the crux of what's going to help them be productive and want to do it some more.
Thank you, Stacy. Keep going. I think go down to the next section, Sarah. Keep going. So that's the second question. What's happening in Asheville? Okay, stop here for me, Sarah. Thank you. So this is where I've just kind of I've dropped the data we've been looking at from these different surveys that we've done, or the one that y'all did, and the outreach that we've done to inquire from other jurisdictions. These are like the bullet point data that we're looking at. we've looked through these, we've pulled out the findings that we just scrolled through really quickly. My request from y'all specifically, in addition to whatever notes you'd like to make in this document, is to kind of look through these bullet points and note if there's any other significant findings that you think should be uplifted in that earlier section of the summary report. That would be really helpful. I think I've looked at this so much, my eyes are crossed and I can't, find anything else in it, but y'all might be able to see anything with fresh eyes. And just highlight it or send us an email saying, hey, these couple of bullet points make me think that this is a significant finding that should be highlighted earlier in the report. And that would be hugely beneficial to me. Do y'all have any questions about that request? All right, scroll down for me some more, Sarah, to the next section. As you can see, there's a lot. So this is the third question, if you will. So what are some potential options that the city could look further into? And this is where we have a menu of potential accommodations. So as staff, we're doing this research and thinking through how we might present this information. There was that request for some suggestions on what we should look into. And rather than make a list of everything that could be possible, we wanted to present it in a way where it could be easier to evaluate costs and benefits associated with each suggestion or potential option. And so that's what the menu of potential accommodations does. So it's got a layout that will hopefully make it easy to kind of look and see for council members to pick and choose which suggestions or categories that would be that they'd like us to look further into or pursue. If you will open that up for us, Sarah, and then I'll let you talk a little more about this because you've been working really closely with this one.
All right. I can put a link in this chat as well. Yes, again, just we're trying to lay out big picture. What are the various things that we could do? Not saying that we should do all of them. So would really love some feedback on, we talked a lot about stipends, but as we scroll down, thought about other perks that were also mentioned, the parking vouchers, meals, snacks, but also professional development type things. What would bring value to committee members as well as our community? So try to dive deeper into what that could look like. And of course, there's some costs associated, but would love to hear more about what you think as far as opportunities and the challenges would be associated. We tried to know if there was any case studies that we were noting off of, and then we could always add a lot more questions and notes as we develop this. So again, this is kind of throwing things at the wall, big picture, a lot to flesh out. And with feedback from y'all as well as council, we can dive deeper into what this might look like. So this is, again, very big picture. So looking at the structure, facilitated meetings, more on the perks. And then lastly, is more community engagement needed before we can even consider doing any of this? So that is something to also consider. So again, if there's anything that we haven't thought of as far as opportunities, challenges, or ideas for what could happen. Nina, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm just looking at this briefly, and I just wanted to mention, we talked briefly, brought up the issue of recent court rulings on this, and this, to my mind, is another reason to not use qualified stipends, because the process of qualifying people inevitably is going to raise questions about who is getting a perk and who isn't, and what. It's kind of like the way I argued that we could administer tax grants based on data that was already in the public real estate database without taking income into account at all, and end up with a very equitable result based purely on length of ownership and change in value of property below a certain threshold. Could have done that automatically with no staff time investment to speak of, and without bringing in any other questions about demographics. I feel pretty much the same way about the issues of stipends. I say, don't go through a qualifying process. People are
So,
always
Nina?
entitled to decline if they want. But if you start making people jump through hoops to prove that they're poor, they're not going to want to participate. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. It's work that they don't want to have to do. People are just going to decline to participate if you put up those kinds of barriers and if you single them out to have to claim need. So please just don't do that.
So, Nina, you're going into where it says that the member would need to apply to receive a stipend. You're saying they, what were we saying earlier, to just opt out if you don't want one or if you don't need one. Everybody gets one unless you tell us you don't.
Right.
But the tax implication is interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And that also gets into, I'm now a chair of a child care center. You know, if some of them don't want us to give them a bonus of $200 because that pushes them into a different bracket for their child care subsidies. I mean, this is, these things are,
And
people are working that close to the line that are impoverished.
And that's something that's noted here because we did hear that from
Right.
a jurisdiction as well.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's an indication of how broken our system is to begin with.
Ain't
So
that
the trick
truth?
there is to leave them to their own judgment. Do they want to accept a stipend or not?
Mm-hmm.
Do y'all have any other questions about the format of the menu of options or how to read it? Anything else, any clarification we can provide while we're looking at it together?
And we know this is a lot to digest. So again, if you just
I
want to
think
make
the
notes in the
formatting
document.
it's actually very good and helpful and clear. So good job.
I'm curious to know, because I have participated in some of these where you've given tickets out to the SoCon or to the Nature Center, to the luncheons. What has been the most sought after?
SoCon was a big hit. I will say
Uh-huh.
with new management, it's not likely that we'll be able to provide that again. That may change. But I think we had a great hit with Nature Center as well. I'm not
Mhm.
sure how, maybe even we haven't tried baseball tickets. So that's something worth looking into. But other ideas, what would be a good incentive?
I just kind of, I was thinking about that. That's family centered. It gets them out into our community for them to maybe see some attractions and benefits that we have in our community that they may not be able to normally go to and things like that. So I do like that idea particularly. I'm not too crazy about awards. Unless you're going to give me a free parking space downtown. But I'm also the one who says I never have problem getting parking spaces downtown where I want to be. So that, Nina, you had a question?
No, I'd just like to make a comment about the issue of awards. I think awards can be cheesy. They can create resentment and all that stuff. But I do think thinking carefully about what appreciation and recognition look like and what you can do to meet participants where they are in terms of what they would like in terms of recognition for their service. is a really useful question to ask, because that looks different to different people. Do you just want, do you want a bouquet, or do you want, a little plaque that you can put on your office wall, or, I mean, people have all different ways of feeling appreciated, and figuring out what those might be that isn't, prohibitively expensive, or, maybe somebody just wants an extra $20, I mean, it could be that simple. But recognition, I think, is much more about the interpersonal appreciation than it is about any specific token. But if you give something to someone that means nothing to them or is embarrassing to them, then it's worse than giving them nothing.
Well, it's getting on to 6:30. Elise, you
Yeah.
had a question?
Oh, well, just to wrap things up, I just wanted to say that I think you guys have done, aside from maybe including some more disability accommodations in there, I think you guys have done a really comprehensive, put together a really comprehensive menu of options for the city councilors to consider, as well as for the public to consider if or when this goes to public engagement. And the public will certainly have a lot to say about it too. But I think you guys have done a really good job of just stepping back and seeing everything that is out there. So thanks.
Thank you. You're looking at a lot of staff hours and time invested.
I think you can appreciate that.
Yes, I believe that this group can.
But
Thank you
yes,
all.
thank you. And thank you for including us in this process.
Yeah, well done, and thanks.
So in conclusion, go ahead and keep adding some notes. You can email me and Elena. We are saying until October 30th, and that will give us time to incorporate our update to equity and engagement. Yeah, council committee at the end of November. So
Thank
awesome.
you.
Hope to hear from y'all soon.
All righty, ma'am. Appreciate it, Sarah. Well, that was interesting. Some similarities that I hadn't expected. Y'all, I've lost my agenda. Wait, no, I haven't. Here it is. Thank y'all for helping them out. I think they greatly appreciated it, and I think we gave them some really good feedback that they were most appreciative of. So getting on to what we've got. Did y'all have a chance to look at Elise's presentation? On the PowerPoint presentation? So there was Nina, I can't hear you. There was a link in the notice that Patrick sent. It was embedded in the agenda.
Yeah, I lost track of Patrick's thing, and I apologize. I have not looked at the most recent version.
Elise, you want to share it? Are you able to do that?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Elise and I were talking before y'all got on that for those who are going to be doing the presentation, maybe we need to get together and just have a brief meeting to make sure that who's going to talk about what and how we're going to stage all of that. Who wants to speak? If that is not your thing, I know some people with public speaking, I might as well just ask you to go kill your firstborn or something. If public speaking is not what you want to do not be afraid to say, no, thank you. But if you are comfortable with it, I think the knowledge base that you guys have would be very beneficial if they have questions. And even if you're in the audience and you could just come up and answer the question or something. that would be great. But be thinking about that. And if you could let Elise know if you're interested in being a presenter. I see my role is just introducing the product and the people and maybe the minuscule way we got here. And, 3 minutes. And then the rest of the show is for you guys.
Do we have a date for this presentation?
Yeah, hold on. Let me find it. It would be, I'll have to send it back.
November 14th.
Thank you. I knew it was.
I'm
close.
checking the time.
No.
It's November 14th at 1 p.m. And I think they meet virtually. So this is a virtual meeting.
It might be. I'll double check that with Sarah and let you all know. And then we're going to meet with Sarah and Ben. The presenters are going to meet with Sarah and Ben on November 7th, just to do a run through kind of to make sure we're all copacetic. And that will be a face-to-face meeting. Alan, you were asking where it'll be at the city building at 2:00.
Can you repeat the date and time, please?
Yes. Tuesday, November 7th at 2:00 at the city building. And that'll be with Sarah and Ben Woody.
So that's a run through.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a room number where we're meeting?
I'll get you a room number before then.
Thanks.
Yes, it's I say run through just to make sure that they have no surprises, I think is really what they're concerned about, though they've been following along all along. So they're pretty much on top of things. But they've asked us to meet with them, so we'll meet with them. Let's see, it's 6:30. Do y'all want to run through this presentation and just see if there's any concerns that you might have with what the team has put together?
Well,
Yes,
I gotta say, I'm just flipping through it right this minute, and it looks fabulous.
Doesn't
Nice-
it though?
Nice
It
job
really
with
does.
the graphics. Really, really good.
I'm cool if we want to flip through it slide by slide, but I'm also cool if we don't want to do that. I know some people have left some comments along the way and seen it already. So yeah, I put my email in the chat there. So if you want to participate in the presentation, just email me and let me know, in what way you want to do it. And I'll take over whatever parts people leave over.
D Williams had some comments on there. Who was the anonymous that responded back to her? Was that you, Elise? No, you have your name.
Most of mine have my name. with
Go
them.
further up. Whoever was anonymous, thank you. Those were great responses. So this person right here, that one up, this one. This person.
I think that was D.
Well,
She said
wait.
she.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. I see what you're saying. But
Yeah,
then we
so
have.
let's talk about that's one thing that we should talk about, the virtual meetings.
Mhm.
Here, I'll actually slideshow this for us.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Definitely I agree with Dee that, we've got a 2-to-1 preference for virtual meetings. And we also have a fair bit of people who are undecided. So I think that would be best to highlight here. And maybe we need to go back through the draft and just look back at how we phrased that stuff. Because I think before it kind of made it sound like it was half and half, and that's not the case.
How do I see the comments? I'm looking at it on my web browser, and I don't know, how do I see?
So,
How do I show comments?
how do you show comments?
Oh, okay, never mind. I thought there were comments on this virtual meeting slide, but they're not. But I see the comments on other slides. So never
Okay.
mind.
Yeah, they're not there. It was related here to the key takeaway.
Okay.
So I think that needs a little revision too. But but these key takeaways are exactly worded word for word from the document. So I want to make sure it gets changed in both places to match. So I'll make a note to edit that.
Okay. Anything else? What was so on the go back to that slide you just had up about participation or type? Yeah, that one. So are you saying that ratio, if you were to add did not answer and not sure together, it flips how people feel? What I wasn't quite sure what Dee was saying.
So there is, if you look at the people who did declare a preference in virtual versus in person, it's 2 to 1, like twice as many people preferred in person.
Okay. Yes.
There's even more people than either of these that weren't really sure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more to be done there, more engagement.
So basically only 60% of the people who responded had an opinion one way or the other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this is specifically for board members that served in 2020 and later. So
right.
It's the people who actually experienced or had the opportunity to experience both because it was during the pandemic years.
Ted, you have a question?
So yeah, so does does this population that's in the chart, does it only include those people who were 2020 and later? Does this big thing of people who didn't respond include people who were not eligible to respond because they were pre-2020?
No, I've filtered it to just 2020 and later, and then this is the proportions within that subset.
Okay, got it.
Great question.
Oh, you're the teacher's pet today, Ted. Let's see. Any other?
So yeah, I didn't have any more.
Okay.
Those were the things that got comments.
Alan, you had a comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. And I remember way back when in graduate school, I took a course on nonverbal communication. And on certain boards and commissions, I think having a face-to-face meeting is rather important, especially when you have I serve on a quasi-judicial board that has hearings, and it's important for me to actually see the individual who's giving testimony at that meeting and to look at and be able to see how they're responding to questions from the board itself. And you can't pick that up when you're doing virtual meetings. But, I do think that certain boards and commissions would lend themselves to virtual participation, especially if individual is inconvenienced in some way of not being able to participate or has an ADA issue. So I think, we need to think about both still.
I agree.
Okay. I'll tell you, just in the consulting that we do, trying to get camaraderie going on a Zoom meeting is like impossible for groups that only are meeting once or twice. So yeah, I think, for what they're trying to do. And also the comment that was made in one of these statements about that we must be sure that the people who are serving understand that they really, regardless of what the name of the group is that they are in an advisory role. They are not, somebody said, you're not a board of directors directing city council. You are an advisory. And I think they lose sight of that. And so I think that that goes back to what we were saying about the training and the skill level of the chair and the liaison, and making sure that the people who are participating understand all that. Okay, folks.
Changes on the fly.
Yeah, I know it's hard, isn't it? Hopefully, I have just been so swamped. Hopefully, I can look at some of these questions for staff this week. Seeing some of their comments in this report that we saw tonight gives me a little bit more focus on what we can do. And I'm trying to get it down to like 6 questions. So they'll just go bam, 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 and we can get a high rate of return and go from there. Is there anything else that we need to talk about?
I was just going to say, if I put my email in the chat, I might have said that already. I'm sorry, but it's over there.
I don't know that you did. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. Anything else, folks? Seeing none, I say that we're adjourned. What, Ted, what are you saying?
Thank you.
Nina has something.
Thank you.
Just one quick question.
Yes. Oh, no. No.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I know that at some point, this group is going to move to a recommendations phase. And I'm just wondering when we're thinking about engaging with that conversation.
When we get the feedback from the staff, and hopefully we're going to set this up so that it's a very quick survey with very quick analysis, very little open-ended questions, so that our crack team can just go blam, done. And so that we can blend the 2 response groups together to say between what staff is looking at and what participants are looking at. Because one of the things I keep hearing from council, let me make sure I'm saying that right. What I keep hearing from council is that, oh, this is what the staff wants. This is what the staff wants. But I'm not hearing that from the people who are liaisons. So I don't know what staff council is hearing it from. So we're gonna survey all of the liaisons, which is
So
about.
have we ruled out going back for a second dip in the participants pool? We've said we're not going to do that. Okay.
Elise?
We did ask participants if they wanted to be contacted for follow-up questions, and I don't know if we need to like look at how we phrased it. As did we say like in the event of follow-up questions, or did we give people the expectation that they would get follow-up questions? Because I think we owe it to them to follow up if we implied that in our survey.
Yeah, my recollection was that we asked if they would be willing to be contacted, and if so, they gave us an email address or a phone number. I don't recall how many there were that responded in the positive.
Right. That's correct.
I'm trying to look up the question really quickly.
That's my recollection as well. I don't think there was any indication that it would happen.
I'm not seeing the question in here at all.
Well, you can just send us a note back. How's that? Anything else? Any other questions? Okay, guys. Have a nice evening. Stay warm. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Elise, thanks for doing the technical stuff.
No problem.
You might have a new job, you know? Take care.
Bye-bye.
And of course, I can't